Hello and welcome. It's 10 a.m. on Thursday, the 19th of June. You're tuned into our mid-morning newscast here on ARIRANG TV. Let's take a look at what's making the headlines. On the second leg of her Central Asian tour, President Park Geunhye urges North Korea to learn from Kazakhstan's experience that denuclearization can lead to economic development and stability. Defending champions Spain are eliminated from the World Cup after slumping to a 2-0 defeat to Chile. Australia are also out after the Netherlands beat them 3-2. Plus, the US Federal Reserve slashes its 2014 growth forecast to between 2.1 and 2.3%, down from an earlier projection in March. It also cuts its monthly bond purchases to $35 billion a month, as widely expected. But our top story this morning, President Park Geun-hye has told North Korea that there can be peace, prosperity and stability after denuclearization. Speaking in the Kazakh capital of Astana on Wednesday ahead of her summit with the Kazakh president, President Park said Pyongyang only need to look at Kazakhstan's own experience. Our Chae Yusan filed this report from Astana.
President Park says North Korea should take a lesson from Kazakhstan, having achieved economic development after giving up its nuclear arms. In an interview with a Kazakh TV station that aired on Wednesday, President Park spoke highly of the Central Asian nation's voluntary handover of some 1,000 former Soviet nuclear warheads in return for large-scale economic aid and security assurance from the West. Emphasizing that the two Koreas must prepare for reunification, President Park introduced her recent three-point proposal to first resolve the North's humanitarian issue, set up infrastructure in the North, and increase people-to-people exchanges. Meeting Koreans and the descendants of Korean immigrants from the former Soviet Union in Astana Wednesday, President Park expressed hopes to increase cooperation with Kazakhstan on renewable energy, transportation infrastructure, science, and technology. The president has been traveling Central Asia to promote her initiative of reconnecting energy and logistics infrastructure across Eurasia for regional peace and a new global economic system. Touting the Korean Kazakh community's achievements, President Park pledged customized support for them to well adjust to their environment while maintaining their ethnic identity, and for Koreans and the ethnic Koreans to develop under coexistence. With economic ties and North Korea high on her agenda, President Park, when she meets her Kazakh counterpart on Thursday, will seek to expand bilateral economic cooperation as well as Astana's support for her trust-building policies with North Korea. Chae Yusan, ARIRANG News, Astana.
Back here in South Korea, and controversy still looms over the president's prime minister nominee regarding some dubious remarks he made a few years ago. As we could see there, President Park is currently in Kazakhstan on the second stop of her Central Asia tour. But her presidential officials over there and back here in Seoul say she will decide on whether to proceed with him when she gets home. Our Ji Myung-gil reports.
President Park Geun-hye is mulling over whether to submit a motion to the National Assembly asking for a confirmation hearing on Prime Minister-designate Moon Chang-gu.
The president is receiving updates on domestic affairs from top aides during her trip. The motions requesting the confirmation of nominated cabinet members will be reconsidered after she returns to Korea.
The presidential office had earlier said it would ask the parliament to prepare for a hearing this week. The postponement comes as both rival parties have been stepping up pressure on Moon to step down. He's been under fire for making controversial remarks years ago about Japan's colonization of Korea. At Wednesday's interpellation session, lawmakers grilled members of President Park's cabinet, where it became apparent that the prospects of Moon winning parliamentary confirmation are dim. One Hae-young lawmaker for the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy lashed out at the presidential office for Moon's nomination.
There seems to be a problem with the presidential office. It's not making the right choices for Prime Minister. What's going on?
I regret the fact that such controversies continue to rise. I cannot comment on the presidential office's verification system for candidates.
President Park's first choice for Prime Minister An Dae-hee withdrew his nomination amid criticism that he had made too much money as a lawyer, benefiting from his status as a former Supreme Court justice. The National Assembly will resume the interpellation session on Thursday with a focus on the economy. While details on the agenda have not been released, it's believed lawmakers will focus on bolstering safety management systems in response to April's ferry disaster. Jimyeong-gil, ARIRANG News.
And South Korea has hinted that it might consider lifting certain economic sanctions off North Korea if Pyongyang chooses to show good faith in improving inter-Korean relations. Speaking at the National Assembly on Wednesday, Unification Minister Geunhye said that if the mood on the peninsula changes for the better and Pyongyang shows steps towards building trust with the South, then the conditions could be met to remove those sanctions. The sanctions, known as the May 24th measures here in Korea, put almost all inter-Korean economic deals on hold, except for the joint Kaesong industrial complex. A UN monitor is calling on the international community to step up efforts to deal with North Korea's continuous human rights abuses. The UN Special Rapporteur, Marzuki Derazman, said Wednesday that recent findings by the Commission of Inquiry on Human Rights Abuses in North Korea show it's not just a political issue, but an international one. His inquiry team is calling for Pyongyang to be held accountable for the International Criminal Court to potentially prosecute leader Kim Jong-un and other powerful figures within the regime. A recent UN report showed that human rights abuses like rape, torture, and enslavement are prevalent in North Korea. Now, the Vatican has announced the itinerary of Pope Francis's trip to South Korea in mid-August. The Vatican says the Pope will arrive in Seoul on August 14th and attend a welcoming ceremony at the presidential office of Cheonghwa, where he will meet with President Park Geun-hye. The following day, he will preside over a mass in the central city of Daejeon, attended by the families of the victims of the Seoul-ho ferry disaster. He will also beatify 124 Korean martyrs, officiate a mass at the 6th Asian Youth Day, and he will also meet with the leaders of South Korea's 7 major religions and hold a mass at Myeongdong Cathedral in central Seoul. This is a way to send a message of peace throughout Korea.
Said that a team of South Korea.
Get connected to Korea and the world. Join us every weekday for the latest developments out of Korea, Asia, and beyond. On air, on your mobile, and online, we lead the way every day. ARIRANG News.
To try and resolve the crisis in Ukraine, the European Union also offers $15 billion. Now, the U.S. Federal Reserve has come out with a relatively upbeat assessment of the U.S. economy in the long term, at least. The Fed says the economy is showing signs of strength. There was a weak first quarter, though, and that means they decided to cut their growth outlook for this year only. Our Connie Lee has this report.
The U.S. Federal Reserve has given a positive outlook for the economy this year, even though the economic growth forecast was slashed. From a projection of 2.9% in March, growth has been cut to between 2.1 and 2.3%. This is the latest from the two-day meeting of the Federal Reserve's policymakers. At a press conference on Wednesday, Fed Chair Janet Yellen, however, expressed the U.S. economy is rebounding and said interest rates, currently near zero, could begin to rise sometime next year. If this happens, it'll be the first rate hike since 2006. The exact timing, though, apparently depends.
There is no mechanical formula whatsoever for what a considerable time means. The answer as to what it means is it depends. It depends on how the economy progresses.
And as widely expected, the Fed cut its monthly bond purchases by another $10 billion to $35 billion, which shows confidence of a recovering economy. The Fed, in the meantime, will keep a watch on economic stability.
Yellen came out and said that volatility may be too low, and we agree. Bond market volatility is very low. The stock market volatility is very low. So any sudden spike or in volatility could cause interest rates to rise pretty sharply.
Growth projections for 2015 and 2016 have been maintained, and Fed officials do forecast a drop in unemployment. Connie Lee, ARIRANG News.
Now to some domestic economic news. And Korean electric vehicle battery makers have been establishing themselves as major players in the global market in recent years. And now they're even set to overtake Japan in global market share, at least. Now, Connie Kim has this report.
China plans to have 5 million electric vehicles on the road by 2020 as part of plans to address its chronic air pollution problem. It's a market Korea's EV battery makers are moving quickly to enter. Korea's #1 EV battery maker, LG Chem, inked a deal this week to supply to China's largest automaker, Shanghai Automotive Industry and Chorus Automotive.
Shanghai automotive industry, unlike other local brands, caters to the high-end market. It has huge influence over the Chinese market. So we are expecting greater sales thanks to our recent contract.
From 2009 to 2011, during the infancy stages of the electric auto industry, Japan led the market, but Korea is making up ground. Last year, Korean companies took up more than 40% of the EV battery market share, and this is the year Korea is expected to leapfrog Japan. Other Korean players are also expanding their presence in China as well. Samsung SDI plans to invest $600 million over the next 5 years to build an electric car battery factory in China. And SK Innovation has entered into a joint venture with Beijing Desk Technology with the goal of becoming China's top EV battery manufacturer. Korean companies face the challenge of developing new, safe materials that can be used in next-generation products.
Secondary cell batteries, such as lithium-ion batteries, are regarded as dangerous because they contain liquid. Many companies from Europe and Japan are in the process of solidifying these batteries, but no Korean companies are trying it yet.
Extending the lives of batteries is another task for Korean companies who hope to cement themselves in China's green car market, which is expected to grow 20-fold by the year 2020. Connie Kim, ARIRANG News.
Now, Korea has lots and lots of free trade agreements, but the Korea Colombia FTA continues to face difficulties as Colombia's Congress has refused to approve it. According to Latin America's news network, Telesur, Colombia's House of Representatives on Tuesday decided to further study the clauses of the FTA and discuss the pact again at next month's session. The stall comes amid concerns the agreement will hurt Colombia's automobile industry. The FTA was signed by Colombia and Korea in February of last year, and it's supposed to cut tariffs by 96% within just 10 years' time. Korea's bourse operator is set to implement measures soon aimed at helping more local companies, small companies as well, go public. The Financial Services Commission and the Korea Exchange announced the plan back in April to ease rules on filing and disclosing corporate financial information in order to boost the country's declining IPO market. This market has been bogged down, in fact, by the sluggish economy and some very strict regulations. But starting June 30th, a company with high-end technology and a certain amount of growth potential can be listed on the Kosdaq with just 1 billion won, that's roughly $1 million in capital. The trade restriction period for the largest shareholder of a firm that debuts on the Kosdaq, this secondary market, will also be cut from 12 to 6 months. Now, income disparity, which is, of course, the growing gap between the rich and the poor, is something we see across the world, and South Korea is absolutely no different. The nation's economic policymakers are desperately trying to get a handle on this big problem as the gap continues to get wider and wider. Our Geunhye has this report.
In 2012, the top 1% income group in Korea earned around $285,000 a year. That is 17.5 times more than the nation's middle income earners. And this pay gap has been continuing at a fast pace for the past 20 years. A report from the Asian Development Bank shows that Korea's Gini coefficient, one of the main measures used to gauge the income gap, grew at the 5th fastest rate among 28 Asian countries. Experts say massive layoffs during the Asian financial crisis in 1997 pushed out many of the nation's middle class.
Before the crisis, most ordinary people thought they had a job for life, and companies were reluctant to fire people. But after the crisis, a large number of mass layoffs took place, which resulted in widening income gaps.
One of the main economic priorities for the current administration is pulling Korea out from the low-growth trap, and boosting domestic demand is considered the key. Experts say that active private consumption comes from a large and healthy middle-income group. So no matter how much more money the wealthy higher-income population earns, it does not necessarily lead to more consumption.
The recent dip in private consumption has made companies skittish about investing more. That results in more money just being piled up. This vicious cycle is a cause of the slowing growth trend for the Korean economy.
While there's no one clear-cut answer to address the issue, experts do agree on the need for creating quality jobs. They add that reforming the employment structure, which includes measures like raising the minimum wage and bolstering the work share program, is also critical. Geunhye, ARIRANG News.
And good morning to you all as we continue on with our 2014 Brazil World Cup coverage. And starting things off, quite a shocker earlier today as the defending champion Spain were eliminated from Group B after losing to Chile 2-0. Now, in a must-win situation for the Spaniards, their world-class defense was nowhere to be seen as they gave up 2 goals in the first half as Chile took a 2-0 lead going into the second half. And while Spain had several chances to score in this match, all those chances went to waste as Chile hung on to beat the 2010 champions 2-0. Now, with 2 losses in Group B, Spain has officially been eliminated from their group. And now moving on to the other matches that took place earlier today, including the high-scoring match between the Netherlands and Australia. Now, just a thriller of a match here as the Socceroos actually gave a pretty good fight throughout the 90 minutes of the match, while Arjen Robben scored his 3rd goal of the tournament in the 20th minute. Tim Cahill quickly leveled the match a minute later. And while Australia had a brief lead in the second half, it was Robin van Persie who scored the equalizer, followed by Memphis Depay's game winner in the 68th minute, which gave Netherlands the exciting 3-2 victory. Meanwhile, with Cameroon and Croatia squaring off at Arena de Amazonia, Croatia gets on board early thanks to Olic, but the crucial part of the match was when Alex Song elbows a Croatian player and gets the straight red, leaving them down a man. With that, Croatia continues to score, including Mario Mandzukic, who scores twice in the second half as Croatia takes this match 4-0. Now, there's been an onslaught of goals at the 2014 World Cup so far, and the Brazuca, the official match ball, may just be that reason. Kim Min-ji tells us more about the most advanced soccer ball yet.
In Team Korea's first match at the Brazil World Cup against Russia, forward Lee Geunhye connected on a long-range goal. The ball seemed to be in the grasp of the Russian goalkeeper, but bounced off his hand and found its way into the net. The Brazuca, the official match ball of the 2014 World Cup, has been pointed to as a possible reason behind the Russian player's miscue. It has deeper and longer seams which contribute to its aerodynamics. Its unique surface also makes it less air-resistant. Therefore, offensive players will find it easier to roll the ball with greater speed and accuracy, while making it harder for goalkeepers to snare.
Simply put, it is like a volleyball. It will be hard to catch if the goalkeeper doesn't have a sensitive reaction to the ball.
To prepare for the Brazuca, Team Korea used a smaller ball during training.
I was able to enhance my concentration by using a smaller ball during training sessions. As I have to dive for the ball faster, it requires more agility.
The Brazuca has made the Brazil World Cup a high-scoring affair. There's been an average of 3 goals per match so far, a figure not seen in more than 40 years at a World Cup tournament. Faster and stronger, the bazooka may indeed be a deciding factor in future matches. Kim Min-ji, ARIRANG News.
And now with that, finishing things off, once the 2014 Brazil World Cup comes to an end, the next World Cup event will take place in Russia, which is why Russian President Vladimir Putin will be on hand in Brazil for the World Cup final and the handover event. Now, according to several reports, the Russian President Vladimir Putin will fly over to Brazil next month and attend the World Cup final, followed by the handover event, where the baton will be passed over to Russia for the 2018 World Cup. With the World Cup coming to Russia next, the nation has pledged to put in $20 billion in building new stadiums and infrastructures for one of the biggest sporting events in the world. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Now, time for a look through the international headlines we're following at this hour. For that, we turn to our Eunice Kim standing by at the News Center. Good morning, Eunice.
Good morning, Mark.
So this fierce battle between militants in Iraq is now involving, we believe, the country's largest oil refinery.
That's absolutely right. We're talking about the Baiji refinery located 210 kilometers north of Baghdad. It supplies about a quarter of Iraq's refining capacity. Now, Islamist fighters attacked the refinery in the early morning hours, triggering fierce fighting. Reports on the ground said militants took control of 3/4 of the facility. This despite government officials saying security forces thwarted the raid, killing 40 terrorists. International oil companies, including ExxonMobil and BP, have pulled out some of their staff. Meanwhile, U.S. President Barack Obama met with congressional leaders to consider options as Vice President Joe Biden spoke with Iraq's Shiite, Sunni, and Kurdish leaders to urge for solidarity amid efforts by ISIL insurgents to break the country apart. In Afghanistan's presidential election, candidate Abdullah is demanding a halt to vote counting, citing widespread fraud that included ballot box stuffing meant to work in the favor of his rival, Ashraf Ghani. The former foreign minister announced that his campaign was suspending engagement with the Election Commission and recalling his party monitors from Election Commission offices. The final results of the runoff vote were to be unveiled in July. Abdullah had won the most number of votes in the April polls, but faced a runoff when he did not secure an outright majority. There has been no comment yet from his contender and former World Bank economist, Ashraf Ghani. Sri Lanka's government has moved against a UN probe on alleged human rights violations committed during the country's long civil war. The civil war ended 5 years ago, with Sri Lanka's military defeating the Tamil Tiger rebels who wanted to create a separate state for the ethnic minority. A United Nations report suggested that as many as 40,000 ethnic Tamils may have been killed in the last months of the fighting, a finding the government has denied. Parliament voted overwhelmingly for a motion that decried the investigation as one that would be, quote, detrimental to the process of reconciliation and peace, and that it erodes the sovereignty, dignity, and stature of Sri Lanka. The move, however, would not bind the UN investigation. Talks between high-level officials of China and Vietnam have ended without progress amid a flare-up of tensions over maritime borders in the South China Sea. The meetings in Hanoi were the first high-level talks since China's deployment of a huge oil rig in May that triggered deadly anti-China protests in Vietnam. Both sides agreed in principle to settle territorial disputes peacefully while maintaining their stances. China's top diplomat Yang Jiechi told Vietnam to stop hyping up disputes, and Vietnamese Prime Minister Nguyen Thanh Dung said China was violating international law.
Well, that's all we have for now, but we will be back at noon Korea time. Stay with ARIRANG. Until then, goodbye.